Never in my life have I ever seen a more misunderstood interpretation of a literary concept than how badly the modern SpongeBob writers missed the point of the imagination box. What is the imagination box? How was it used to tell a compelling story? And how did one episode absolutely ruin the concept? Chapter 1. Idiot Box. Idiot Box, as a story, is driven by one important object, which I will refer to as the imagination box. The box is introduced as nothing special. In fact, when the box first appears, you may not even think it would be the thing that dominates the plot of this episode, as the scene is much more focused on what is in the box, a big screen TV, which is promptly thrown in the trash, representing SpongeBob and Patrick's rejection of entertainment created by others in favor of their own imagination, which is represented by the box. The narrative then establishes the rules of the box. Rule number 1, it is ambiguous whether or not the box has any magical properties. Sure, Squidward hears noises coming from the box that are consistent with the magical adventures SpongeBob and Patrick claim to have, but the narrative gives the box enough plausible deniability that it could in fact just be an empty box. One possible explanation that Squidward himself ponders is that SpongeBob and Patrick just have a tape recorder and are messing with Squidward. Or, if you look a little deeper, perhaps what Squidward is hearing is the fun that SpongeBob and Patrick are having with their imaginations, which, since he himself is a rejecter of imagination, manifests and sounds like the real thing, which distresses and confuses him. Of the three possibilities, none are ever confirmed in the episode. By leaving the magical qualities of the box ambiguous, the narrative succeeds in communicating the lesson of the importance of imagination. The episode also focuses quite a lot on boxes, as shown with the scene where Squidward tries to watch TV and sees nothing but boxes. This focus on boxes is meant to reinforce Squidward's central character flaw. He is missing the point of imagination. He's wrapped up in the idea of seeing and hearing the literal things, the same way he would by watching TV. He's wrapped up in finding a button or a switch that makes the box turn on. He's wrapped up in the box itself, but it's not the box. It's the imagination. Squidward never overcomes this character flaw. In the final scene, he nearly gets it and almost accepts that it really was their imagination, but immediately falls right back into his doubts. A tragic anti-character arc indeed. It's in this moment that he starts to hear the box turning into a race car, which is actually a garbage truck taking the box to the dump, giving Squidward a final punishment for not overcoming his doubts. So you might be thinking right now about how much of a big nerd I am, which, fair. But you may be preparing to write a comment saying, "Who cares about all this? Idiot Box is a good episode because it's funny. Enough with all the philosophy." And what you may be failing to understand, person I just made up, is that the reason this episode is funny is because of all the nerd stuff I just went over. The ambiguity of the box, the deeper themes of imagination, the conflict between these two perspectives. These things drive every single joke in the episode. Except that one joke in the beginning where Patrick is like, "I need my glasses," and he pours out 2 literal glasses and has these big live action eyes. That was just a quick gag that establishes comedic tone. So I do hope that you'll have a deeper imagination in understanding what really made this episode as effective as a narrative as it was, as we talk about the sequel to Idiot Box. Chapter 2. Squidiot Box. Squidiot Box begins with SpongeBob finding the magic box in his attic. Actually, the box got thrown in the dump, so how would it be in SpongeBob's attic? CinemaSins, ding! No, seriously, in a vacuum, it doesn't really matter that SpongeBob finds the box in his attic. I mean, they probably could have just had him be at the dump at the beginning and finding it, and it would have been fine, but I don't know. It's a way to kick off the plot, it doesn't matter. So when SpongeBob gets in the box, he starts to realize that it isn't working. Now, this actually would have been a good setup for the episode. The box isn't working? Did SpongeBob lose his imagination? Oh, what sort of character journey will he go through to get it back? Unfortunately, that's not what happens. So the next scene shows SpongeBob taking the box to a magic box repair place. I guess I could get behind this. Like, it's a bunch of other imaginative people and they all, try to repair their boxes. But, it would be ambiguous if they are literally repairing the magic or just having them symbolically realize it's their imagination, right? It'll all be symbolic. They're not going to literally like confirm that the magic box was magic, right? Like they're not going to do that. You ruined it. How could you do this to me, modern SpongeBob? I try to find the positives in your episodes, I really do, but did you really have the audacity to just confirm that the box from Idiot Box was just actually magic the whole time? That was what made the original episode work, right? What made the episode work was that it was ambiguous to whether or not it was their imagination. That Squidward was wrong about there being a special button or a switch that made the box do what it did. And what you just said was, actually, Squidward was right. It was just a magic box. There's no such thing as imagination. I don't think there is a more fitting representation of how far modern SpongeBob has fallen than that. So then they bring the broken box back and it doesn't work, not because of their own relationship to the concept of imagination, but because it has like faulty wiring or whatever. And then Squidward falls into it and jostles it back into place. And like, what does this represent? This is just things happening. Why was Squidward able to fix the imagination box? What is it about Squidward and his relationship to the concept of imagination that made him fix it? This is the problem when you take a symbolic object like the imagination box and just apply random rules to it that don't have any deeper meaning. And I don't want any of you, the curtains are blue, pro-media illiteracy people commenting, not everything has to have symbolic meaning, bro. Like, first of all, yes, everything in a story does have to have symbolic meaning, but also, even if you don't think that about DoodleBob or Nosferatu or the Flying Dutchman or any other supernatural SpongeBob concept I talked about on this channel, which I get why it takes a deeper understanding of literature to really get why those have deeper meanings. They do have deeper meanings, and you should accept my arguments why they do, but I understand why that's not immediately apparent to every person. But you really can't argue that the imagination box, the thing that SpongeBob puts his arm in the air and says, imagination, doesn't have any deeper symbolic meaning. So then Squidward in the box starts to imagine things and they appear. Not only is this a problem because you actually see what's happening inside of the box itself, again, getting rid of that ambiguity, but it also kind of betrays the pre-established rules of Idiot Box that imply that you have to actually believe in imagination in order to use the box. This episode did not demonstrate that Squidward now believes in imagination and thus would be able to use the box. He just does because we need to move the plot forward. So then there's a bunch of bits where Squidward tries to imagine good things and SpongeBob and Patrick keep obliviously saying bad things that appear in the box and, yada yada, Squidward torture, the security system takes control of Squidward's house. You know what? This episode has bigger problems than that. So Squidward gets attacked by a bunch of dangerous things that have no symbolic meaning other than they are dangerous. The only stakes are, will Squidward die? Which is the weakest, most basic stakes you can have in a narrative. It doesn't engage with anything deeper that the protagonist has to lose that we can relate to. He's just running from stuff and getting hit by stuff and whatever. It's just a waste of time. There's this part where Squidward just says, this episode is so far gone at this point. Like, why does he hate imagination? Is it the concept of imagination? Like, the concept of imagination isn't doing this to him. Like, is it? Can imagination hurt you? Are you anti-imagination, modern SpongeBob writers? Don't answer that. DoodleBob then shows up, and DoodleBob is completely misused here. He's just another threat in a long list of boring threats that mean nothing more than it can hurt you. But I find it particularly insulting that it's DoodleBob, because one, DoodleBob can represent some really dense concepts. Check out my DoodleBob video if you want to know more. And two, DoodleBob and the Idiot Box actually could have crossed over in a way that would have been symbolically meaningful. Like, you know how earlier Squidward said he hated imagination? Maybe this episode's theme could have been how, like, being too imaginative can be dangerous. Like, if you were to isolate yourself from reality and go too far into imagination land, you can end up hurting others, and maybe that could have been represented using DoodleBob. I don't know. I usually like to look at these episodes and say, here's how they could have made it work, but I absolutely cannot get behind the idea of the imagination box being confirmed to be magic. If I were in control of the writing of this show and brought back this concept, I would make sure its magical properties stayed ambiguous. If I were to rewrite the episode, I would have it be about SpongeBob thinking the box was broken, only to have it get fixed when he goes through a character arc where he gets his imagination back. I'd pretty much cut all the details from the episode, and it would be functionally not the same. Anyway, the ending has Squidward go to the Krusty Krab, not realizing he's still stuck in the box. I'm trying to think if this ending has a broader message about how even with limitless imagination, we should still appreciate our own lives, but considering how the writers clearly didn't try with this one, I think it's just supposed to be misdirection without substance. Chapter 3: The Real Reason You Like Idiot Box. So, I'm assuming that you enjoy the episode Idiot Box, right? But why do you like it? It's not a trick question. I know your first answer would be, it's really funny. And that would be my first answer too. But why is this episode funny? A good joke is so much more than just the structure or delivery of said joke. The real, most important part of a joke is its context. And that is what Idiot Box accomplishes, setting up the proper context for its jokes to thrive. It achieves this because it's confident in its themes and uses the box to represent the concept of imagination. Now look, I can never truly know for sure what another person actually believes in their heart of hearts, but if someone told me that they would have enjoyed Idiot Box just as much without that context, without that symbolism, without that substance, I just don't believe you. The heart of why Idiot Box as an episode is as good as it is because the box itself is a clear, concise, and consistent representation of the concept of imagination. The reason why Squidiot Box is a bad episode is because the box in that episode is not clear, concise, or consistent. Now, the box and the things in it in Squidiot Box does still represent something. All supernatural elements of a story do, no matter how poorly they are written. I said a while back in my DoodleBob video, the one that I'm sure you're gonna watch after this video, right? That DoodleBob in its modern appearances didn't represent anything at all. And upon further reflection, what I really meant was the concept it did represent, which was thing that was dangerous, was a weak choice for a story because it didn't engage with anything deeper. But it did, in fact, represent something. The box in Squidiot Box, by the way, represents much of the same. Something dangerous that can hurt you. See, our imagination, while it is limitless in the literal things it can make up, a thousand-headed lion. See, I just made that up. Something that our imagination can never come up with is a concept. Things like the concept of danger, or greed, or imagination. It'd be like coming up with a color that doesn't exist, or a sense you don't have. We don't come up with those things. We observe them in the world, and then when we imagine a thing like the aforementioned thousand-headed lion, it always represents a real concept. The thing isn't real, but the concept is. For example, a thousand-headed lion would represent great power, or perhaps great wisdom, depends on how you use it in a story, but it's literally impossible for you to use it in a story and have it represent nothing. You could write it poorly, but it can't represent nothing. It's conceptually impossible. Does it chase your main character? Well, now it represents power. Does it tell your character a secret? Guess what? Wisdom. Is it just a regular animal, part of the ecosystem? Well, now it represents the concept of nature itself. What really matters when writing a supernatural entity in a story is not whether or not it represents something at all, because it always will, but it is important that you, as the writer, understand what it could represent and make sure its representation isn't shallow. Something just being dangerous doesn't comment on anything deeper about behavior or society or the universe itself, and while it is certainly possible for you to write it that way, it's bad writing. And I think it is bad writing because it isn't a proper story and doesn't challenge people to be more thoughtful or empathetic, which leads to a less thoughtful and less empathetic population if more shallow stories take the place of deeper ones. I've seen a lot of my commenters attempt to argue against this claim, to say that sometimes a thing in a story can just be cool or be scary without any deeper meaning. And when I ask them for an example of a good story that does this, they usually mention a story that does in fact have an entity that represents something deeper. They just didn't understand that it did. I actually had a commenter recently try to say that a kaiju is an example of a monster that is just cool. a kaiju, what Godzilla is, the city-destroying monster that famously represents the power of the atom bomb. Yep, no deeper themes there. And usually, because I like arguing, I'll go a little bit deeper with these commenters. Ask them, why do you want supernatural entities and stories to have no meaning? Why do you think it's better when they aren't? And this one particular kaiju misunderstanding commenter replied by saying that it was stuck up to think that I'm one of those people who says all art is political and that I preach media literacy, which I am. Yes, all art is political and media literacy is extremely important. Of course, this response doesn't actually argue that it's better for entities and stories to have little meaning, but it does communicate to me something concerning, the idea that people are uncomfortable with engaging with deeper concepts. Now, I can't speak for this exact person, or anyone for that matter, but it seems that people are uncomfortable with shows having deeper themes or all art being political. And I think they feel that way because they just don't want to engage with these things, because these things are scary. It's scary to think that you might be Squidward in Idiot Box, lacking in imagination, thinking it's just a box. Well, in a literal sense, you're right. It is just a box. A story is just that. A story, an amalgamation of audio and visual cues meant to hold your attention so that you can watch an ad or whatever. But also, it's magic. Not the literal magic that Squidiot Box so foolishly confirmed to exist, but the symbolic magic of imagination, of expanding the way that you think, of attempting to understand the world around you and looking at things and being okay with them having more meaning, even if that meaning scares you. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Who would have thought an episode called Idiot Box would have so much philosophical jargon, huh? If you want to support the channel, I've got a Patreon and you can also become a channel member. Also, check out my gaming channel. I just did a video over there about the SpongeBob movie GBA game and how it differs from the movie. You should really check it out.